if you go out and start something on your own, it's really like, does the world care about what you're building? It's kind of like a truer test. Yeah, I'd seen people get promoted at Google for doing things that like failed. It got to a point where I no longer believe in the mission or the viability of the business, and my co-founders still did. And it ended up feeling like too much cognitive dissonance for me to like sell a thing to employees and future investors and so forth that I like fully didn't believe in. So we raised like 15 to 17 at the A, and then the B was big. It was like a $50 million Series B.
Pre-revenue.
Crazy, right?
That's product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I called it the product market fit question.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit. Product market fit.
I mean, the name of the show is Product Market Fit.
Do you think the product market fit show has product market fit? Because if you do, then there's something you just have to do. You have to take out your phone. You have to leave the show 5 stars. It lets us reach more founders and it lets us get better guests. Thank you. Zach, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm psyched to be here.
Dude, I'm excited to have you here. I mean, you told me earlier with this latest company, I mean, you raised about 70 million or so.
Yep.
You said it took a bit to get to 1 million ARR, but now you're adding 1 million ARR every 10 days, which is pretty insane. Great place to be in.
It's exciting. I mean, it's been a slog, but it's recently I think we really got it, which is cool.
Perfect. Well, listen, let's start maybe at the beginning. I mean, you told me you were at Google for a while, and then you left to start your first startup, which wasn't Warp. Was a different one before this?
Correct. Yeah. So my career, I did a few things out of college. I actually went to law school for a year. Ended up at Google. Was at Google for a long time.
How'd you go from law school to Google?
Yeah, if you want to really back up. So like my undergrad was in this thing that was like a combination of math, computer science, and philosophy. Unlike, I think, a lot of people coming out of college these days, it wasn't super clear to me if I wanted to be in the tech industry, if I wanted to do something more academic, if I wanted to, I don't know, do something just totally different. And so actually when I graduated college, I worked for a year in tech. And then I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And so I got a master's degree in philosophy. And then I was like, what now? And so I went to law school for a year. Law school, I was like, okay, I don't want to do this. I really didn't want to be a lawyer. I figured that out. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I ended up withdrawing from law school and working in a recording studio because I've always loved music. And I was like, I got to make some money. And what skills do I have to make money? So I actually answered an ad on Craigslist, start working again as a programmer part-time. This was pre-Google. And then this was another startup. I worked there. I was like, I really actually like engineering and programming more than I realized. And so I'd had some friends from college who were at Google who referred me, and I went through the application process and got in there. And then, Google was awesome. I was at Google for about 8 years. The entire time there, I was on Google Docs. I built a lot of Google's spreadsheet product, which was cool. And then by the time I left Google, I was a principal engineer and I was leading engineering for the whole Google Docs team, which was pretty cool.
What'd you think of the philosophy masters, by the way? I majored in philosophy for my undergrad and then switched it to a minor. Just how it was for you?
I loved it. Yeah. So my master's was in philosophy of science. So a very specific type of philosophy. It was like, kind of like, what's the nature of knowledge? How can you be sure that we actually know something? How does science work? I also did a lot of more formal logic. So I really liked that aspect of it, studying like how reasoning works.
It's like the harder, the more rigorous part of the philosophy doctrine.
It was really close to math, what I was doing. And I almost went and did a PhD in logic, which again, I think would have been really cool and interesting, but it gets very, very obscure. And so I was kind of like, I don't know where this goes career-wise, but from a like, learn how to think clearly, learn how to write well, learn how to like analyze arguments. I think philosophy is like an awesome thing to study and would recommend it to anyone. I mean, you liked it?
I guess it was like the logic stuff was definitely cool. Epistemology was pretty cool, but like it was, the softer part of philosophy. And I actually preferred reading. Like I got into it because I like to read a lot of the philosophy books.
Yeah.
I preferred that than actually being in a lecture or a class setting. And a lot of people would just take the class in an annoying tangent too often. And so
I hear that.
That was a bit frustrating, but yeah, I love philosophy itself. So there's that. Cool. So walk me through, 10 years at Google, obviously you've kind of grown to the company, you're leading a massive team and doing very well. What makes you decide to venture on your own?
Yeah, great question. So I'd always wanted to start a company. Even before I started Google, I built various things that I tried to sort of turn into businesses that weren't real businesses. I built like this website for musicians to meet each other and like form bands and jam together. And so
This is during Google, like on the side or before?
this was like a side project I did while I was at Google. I don't know. I'd always wanted to start something. So that was part of it. The other part of it was like just from like a challenge growth standpoint, I thought that it would be a good learning experience. And so
Were you getting bored?
I don't know if I was like bored, but like I feel like throughout my career and also school, I was a really good student and I was also really pretty comfortable working at a place where there was like a very like clear criteria for what you had to do to get promoted. And so I was very good at like climbing a ladder or getting good grades, that type of thing. And I thought it would be like a good experience for me, honestly, to see if I could succeed in a environment that's less about like sort of checking these things to get you like promoted or get you good grades. But like if you go out and start something on your own, it's really like, does the world care about what you're building? Do they like what you're building? It's kind of like a truer test. And I just thought I would learn more from doing it. I'd seen people get promoted at Google for doing things that like failed. It's just like a different skill set. And I was like, if I really want to develop as like a leader and really want to challenge myself, I should try and do something on my own. I'm also super competitive. So from like the standpoint of trying to like win at something, I really wanted to do it. I actually didn't have like super clear idea of what I wanted to work on when I left Google, which I think a lot of people will start companies because they have like some burning problem they want to fix. And that's awesome. I was like, I had an idea. It was not a good idea. It was like a photo sharing app idea. But I was like, I really want to build this thing.
What year was this?
This was 2015. So 10 years ago. So I was like, I really want to build this photo sharing app. It would be an iPhone app. Concept was it was going to be like the fastest way to share photos with your friends. The world didn't really need this.
You didn't have a good idea, let's say, but you did have an idea. It's not like you left with completely carte blanche.
I did have an idea. I was like, I know what I want to build. And so I left and I was like, okay, let me just basically sit in my apartment and try and build this thing.
Would you agree that the risk is actually a lot lower than it seems? Because worst case, you just come back to Google. Like, was that part of your thinking?
Totally. At this point, I was pretty employable. So like if I couldn't get to work, I could go back. But again, I didn't do the things that I think people who are more savvy starting companies would do now. Like I didn't have any like real inkling of like what the business ought to be. I didn't have a co-founder. I didn't really even cross my mind to like raise money. I was like, I'll build this thing myself. I guess that's actually more common now, but like I didn't think of like going to like YC or an accelerator or anything like that. I was just like, okay, I'm going to build this thing. It'll be a cool product. And then obviously people will use it. And that's just not how the world works. And so
was that part of like the Google culture? Like,
yeah, I think Google is an amazing company that sets you up in a uniquely bad way to be a startup founder. Because when I was at Google, anything you launch at Google is going to get millions of people trying it. Right. And like that is not the case, obviously, for a startup. Like the challenge in a lot of ways at a startup is not like, can you build a cool product? It's like, can you get people to care? Can you get in front of people? Can you get them to try it? And so I literally was like never thinking about that in my time at Google because I just took it for granted. Like, okay, well, we'll add a new thing and, millions of people will try it and that's cool. The other thing, I didn't think about at Google, it was just so product and engineering focused that I was never thinking about anything related to like the marketing aspect, sales aspect, the business aspect. Like if you wanted to like get an engineer on your team, you had a million engineers applying to work at Google. I didn't have to go recruit an engineer. Like, Google engineers would just like come in and they would be like the best engineers in the world. And so there are all these things that I didn't think about at Google. And, when I did my first, I won't even call it a company, but like project outside of Google, I made all the mistakes that someone who would take all this stuff for granted.
I'm sure you knew it was going to be much harder, but you probably didn't realize maybe how much harder. Like you'd be like, well, I'm not going to get 1 million people to use it, but like I'll get 10,000. And it was like, wait a second.
Yeah, I'm not like dumb. So I think I knew like this is going to be really hard. Like that was part of the idea of it was like, okay, I want to try something hard. You just don't realize all of the dimensions in which it's going to be hard until you actually try it. Again, I think that's like another, I don't know if it's like career principle, but like for me, the best way that I can learn something is to like try it, learn by doing it. And like, I certainly have had many experiences since Google where I have failed at doing things. And that's like, every time you try something and fail, it's kind of cliche at this point, but you really do learn. I really do. And so like kind of diving in and trying to start something is like the fastest way to figure out all the things that are going to be hard about it. So that definitely was like what I experienced immediately when I built this.
What happens then with the photo sharing app?
So I managed to turn it into like something that was not a total loss for me, which was interesting. So I spent like 6 or 9 months, not a tremendous amount of time building this thing. I got maybe like a few thousand people using it. So I didn't get any like real like significant user traction, but it was like, it worked really well, which makes sense because like I knew how to build stuff. When I moved on to do my next company, which I was the co-founder and CTO of, we were actually able to use the photo sharing app that I had built and repurpose it to be our foundational app for that company. And so I think technically like we structured that like the company acquired the photo sharing app. We're not talking for any like real amount of money here. It's just for like a little bit of equity, but it ended up being something that, was useful for the next 5 years, which was kind of surprising and cool.
What was that next startup and like how did that happen?
So the career arc here. So I did this photo sharing app, which was called Camera Club. And I did it for like 6 to 9 months. And I was like, okay, this is not really going to turn into a thing. I was like, this has been fun to build. It's cool. I learned like, okay, there's a lot of stuff that I'm probably not doing right here. So then my question was like, how do I accelerate my learning even more? I ended up at that point basically pausing to try a couple different avenues. So one was like, I tried to find some co-founders, even before having an idea, just sort of jam on ideas with. So I pursued that route of like, meet some other smart people who were, wanted to start a company that weren't totally confident in the idea.
How'd you do that?
I did that largely through my network. So there were like a bunch of ex-Googlers who were starting companies. There were people from college that I knew who were like in the technology scene in New York. This is all in New York, by the way, where I was doing this. And so I ended up networking. I got introduced to a few people who I thought were very cool, who I spent, let's say like a period of like 3 months, just like idea exploring with. There were very few constraints on it. So I was like looking at ideas in like the healthcare space. And it's like, I don't know anything about healthcare. And again, I wouldn't recommend people do this. You have to put some constraints on what you're going to do if you're going to found a company. And just like cold diving into a very, very complex industry like healthcare where I didn't know anything about it was like we were going and interviewing doctors. And it was like, I don't think that was a great use of my time. But people do start companies this way. I just feel like that's like playing on like extra hard mode. Like it's hard enough to start a company. So you're probably better off starting one where at least you have like, some inkling of the space, the product you want to build, the problems that you want to solve. So I did that.
Yeah, I think you have to have something that pulls you, like whether it's your experience and what you know, or at the very least, what you really care about. Like hopefully a mix of those two things, but at least one of the two.
Exactly. You have to care or you have to know. I think is a great way of putting it. Like I was like, oh, I hate going to doctors' offices and filling out the forms. It's like, okay, like good, like that's not going to cut it for a business idea.
And you're doing this, by the way, like you're not formally a co-founder of anything. You're just exploring things with different people.
Just exploring, just like met other people who are now like really good friends of mine, by the way. It was a cool thing to do, just to like wake up every morning, go to like coffee shops with like Joe and Matt and be like, let's look at this industry today and like, let's see if there's an opportunity here. It was a fun experience to do that, but I didn't feel like we were making a lot of progress. And ultimately, like, I think if you're going to start a company, you really want to have like strong conviction that there's like a real problem you want to work on for a long time. I didn't know all this. I didn't have like a great mentor. It would have been really useful for me to have had someone who's like had been a founder who was really guiding me and like was like, this would be a good way to do it. I didn't have that, unfortunately. But the other thing that I did at the same time was like, I started talking to people who were very, very early, but had already like had an idea and wanted like a technical co-founder. Investors are always pushing this, by the way. Like they'll have a lot of situations where they have a sort of business person who comes in with an idea, and it might be like a cool business idea, but to actually execute on it, they need like a technical co-founder, like someone who can help build it. And so I ended up getting hooked up with the co-founder of the company that I would eventually join, which is SelfMade, through an investor. And the concept behind that company, it was basically like a photo editing marketplace. It was meant to be a consumer app where people would basically submit photos that they had through a mobile app. And on the other end of the mobile app would be professional like photo editors, retouchers, people who could make the photos look good. The consumer would pay like a few bucks per photo. And on the other side, we pay the retouch or something. And so I said no to this idea, like actually a few times, but the co-founder, he's really persistent. He's now a VC. He's like a really good salesperson. He's now like a good friend of mine too. He really convinced me that this was like a smart thing to do. They had already raised a small seed round. He was like really fair with the sort of equity he was offering me. And it was like, I ended up thinking it would be a great sort of opportunity for me to learn in the context of a business that had funding. I knew we could hire people. I knew we could bring a product to market. I believe that there was like some demand for the thing. And so I eventually agreed to do it.
Was he a first-time founder, by the way?
No, and he was a second-time founder. So that was another thing that was actually like appealing to me. So, and his first company was like a dating app that was acquired by IAC, like the Match.com folks. I would learn a bunch from him. And the truth is I did learn a bunch from him. The business had a whole bunch of other problems and issues, which, made it really, really hard and ultimately wasn't a great fit for my skills and passions and all of that. But it was like a good learning experience. I don't know. It wasn't ultimately not like a super successful endeavor, but I learned a bunch from it.
How long were you there for?
I was there for 3 years. So a while. And so we took it from seed through Series A. We got into mid single digits, millions of revenue. So it's we got some real revenue traction on it. It pivoted multiple times. So we started off as this consumer app and the unit economics didn't really work on that. And I think we discovered that relatively quickly. So we ended up having to change it into something that was kind of a marketing solution for small businesses is where it landed. And so the business that we ended up growing was if you were a Shopify store or a small solo entrepreneur yoga teacher or something, and you wanted a professional looking social presence, you would hire SelfMade. And through a combo of it was a tech enabled service essentially. We would take all of your content, we would put together a social media posting schedule. We'd write your captions, we'd edit your photos, and then we would post that for you. And that's actually, that's worth something to a small business where it's they want a professional looking social. And so it was actually relatively easy to sell that product. The problem was, so first it was a problem with unit economics. It was expensive to provide this as a service. It was operationally a huge headache because it was so human powered. You just had to hire people and you had all sorts of quality control problems. It was very expensive to get this labor in the US. So we ended up having some labor overseas in Jakarta. And then it turns out it's really hard to demonstrate or to get someone ROI by just making them a nice looking social feed that actually doesn't on its own drive business. I think there's some sort of power law distribution with what social media does for businesses, where for most people having a social media feed that looks nice is doesn't do anything. But if you actually have a viral social feed, I think it could really be transformative. So it ended up, for all those reasons, I think, not being an awesome business. And it really wasn't a great fit for me because I don't give a shit about social media. I just really don't. It was the weirdest fit for me because it was me with my background building productivity apps. Our company was largely millennial Gen Z social media manager type people. And I was this is a very weird situation.
Back to what you know or what you care.
Yeah. And so again, I learned a ton. I was I built, I think, a really good engineering team there, many of whom I'm still in touch with. Again, I was playing on hard mode because it was I was telling them on a thing where it's I don't know if it's going to work, but I felt I really owed it to the employees, my partner, the investors, everyone to do my best to make the thing successful. But there's a lot of rejection and failure. And so
what happened ultimately?
It got to a point where I was I no longer believe it in the mission or the viability of the business. And my co-founder still did, which cool, good for him. And it ended up feeling too much cognitive dissonance for me to sell a thing to employees and future investors and so forth that I fully didn't believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the point where it would have been basically detrimental for me to stick around and try and do that. And it was something I didn't feel comfortable doing. And so it was a bit of an acrimonious situation. It's kind of a divorce. And it sucked. It sucked for him because it definitely made it harder for them to raise more money. And, I was part of the draw. I was the team of, Zach and Brian. And if Zach's not in, what does that say about the company? And so it sucked a million ways around, but it was what I felt I had to do at the time. I was I cannot be here convincing people to join a company that I don't believe in anymore. And so I ended up leaving.
And what's going through your mind? Are you thinking like, okay, I'll go and rejoin some bigger company or I'll start my own thing? Like, what are you thinking about?
I was just like, I need to do nothing for a minute. I was like, I don't know if I want to start another company or not, to be honest. It was super hard.
At this point, it's what, like 2019?
Exactly. Yeah. So I left in 2019, right at the beginning of 2019. It would have been sort of a waste to go through that whole experience and then not try to use what I had learned to start something new. And so actually the first thing that I did was I spent like a couple months just like writing up, I called it like a post-mortem of like the whole startup experience. Everything that was good about it, everything that was bad about it, everything that I would, if I were to ever start a company again, I would want to sort of adjust or do differently.
Did you publish this?
No. And I don't think I could because it's too personal. It's quite critical. And like it documents like my interactions with the VCs from the company and like the co-founder and like all sorts of like crazy stuff from it. But I did for myself. I do think it would be like super entertaining for people to see, but it's too personal. But it was a really, really good exercise because I came out of it with like a bunch of principles for if I were to do something again, what would matter to me. And like just to share some of that with you, it was like,
yeah, please. I was going to ask.
So I was like, look, if I do something again, I have to really care about the problem that I'm solving. Startups are so hard. They go wrong in so many ways. Pick a problem that you really care about. That was like one of the principles.
By the way, on that one, I used to think it's an interesting one, right? Because I was the guy that when I started my first startup, couldn't care less about the problem. Like in other words, I was like, dude, whatever. Like if the thing's gonna work, if it's a good problem solution set and there's money to be made, like I just want to run a business. Like the reason that now speaks to me so much is because there is almost no way, no matter what you do, it's going to be, like you said, so hard. Yes, you hear stories of somebody puts out a product and it just goes, right? But it's such the exception, you can't plan for that. And even in that case, it's still hard. So like you have to plan for things not going your way so many times that the only thing that keeps you going is the fact that you care.
I had exactly the same experience. When I first started, I was like, I'm going to be very analytical. I'm going to pick a problem. I'm going to try and solve it. I'm going to pick the one that's the best business opportunity. It's like you said, it's so freaking hard. And like the default is failure and people saying no and like the thing not working. I would just pick something that you care about so it's like you're more motivated to keep going with it. So that was one of my principles. Another principle, again, this was more specific to me, was like, I really wanted to build a software business. And like the prior business was like software enabled. It just created a bunch of things that didn't fit my skill set. Like I would much rather like build something where I'm telling a computer what to do and the computer is doing it consistently. And that's the product than I would trying to organize a large number of people doing something. There's all other reasons to build software businesses. Software businesses scale much better. They can grow much faster. And so there's no reason for me to be building a business that's like operationally heavy. I really wanted to focus on team. There are moments at like SelfMade where I felt like we generally had a really good team, but we also like kind of hire people. You end up with just like, I don't know. I was like, I really want to have a smaller, very, very talent dense culture.
You'd hire because you just wanted to fill the role that needed to be filled, or what was the...
It was like, we need a person for this, like get them in. It might make sense in the short term, but it causes in the long term this like deterioration of the quality of the team and the culture. Another thing I decided to do was to kind of like write down and publicize all of my operating principles. This was pretty smart. So for Warp, we have this thing called a How We Work, which is a public Notion document, which I can share the link with you. You can publish it if you want, where it's like,
please,
it's all of the principles of the company written down. And it's things like, what's our hiring process? It's what are the values that we have? It's how do we do coding changes? What's our product process? We spent so much time debating this stuff and wasting time on it at SelfMade and like also at Google. I was like, much better to just like have it written down and let everyone look at it.
What would you say out of that are some of like the more unconventional, non-obvious things that you guys do that you have written down as this is the way we do it?
We have tens of thousands of people who have followed the show. Are you one of those people? You want to be a part of the group. You want to be a part of those tens of thousands of followers. So hit the follow button.
That's interesting. It's not unconventional. It's like an operating system. And so all the way down to like, how do you use Slack, for instance? And it's like, you know, if you're going to come to Warp and you're going to use Slack, you're going to use threads. We're going to be on a model where you don't have to worry about what time you're sending something because it's up to the person who's receiving the message to decide what they read. If you don't just like document this, we'll have people complaining like, oh, why am I getting Slacks on the weekend? It's like, no. The rule is at Warp, you don't have to respond to that Slack on the weekend. That's fine. But I'm not going to put the onus on anyone who's sending a Slack to know everyone else's calendar. And so there's like a whole bunch of, just shit like this.
It makes it like less of a personal attack.
Yeah, it's like, no, we decided on this. Like there's the tactical stuff and then there's the value stuff. And it's like, look, if you come to Warp, I don't know if it's the most unconventional thing, but like I only want to hire people who are product focused or product oriented. And that could be in any role. It's true in engineering, it's true in marketing, it's true in sales. We put everyone who comes to Warp through it's like a PM interview is the final interview stage. We ask them to suggest ideas on how to improve the product. We ask them to explain like what problem it's fixing for a user. This is not something every company does. Probably there's a lot of companies where it's like, we're probably missing out on some really good technical engineers who might not be great like product thinkers. And I'm just like, I've wasted so much time in my life with really, really strong engineers who have no idea what problem they're solving and are just in it for like building the coolest piece of code that they can build. And so it's like, no, we've kind of like enshrined that at the company value level. It lets people who want to apply for a job at Warp, some of them will think that that's like a horrible idea and they'll opt out. And some of them will be like, oh, that's awesome. Like I want to work with people who care about the product as well. It's stuff like that that I think gets us a ton of value from having this resource.
So you build all this, you kind of like high level, going back to the storyline 2019. And then what is this leading to?
Yeah, so I took all this time and I was like, I'm going to write down all the things I learned at SelfMade. I'm going to like start to systematize them and extract stuff for if I were to do another company. And then I was like, I don't know what I want to do yet. And so I was like, I'm going to do some consulting, which is kind of a fun gig if you can get it. So I was consulting where I would like go in and give like advice to startups that were maybe trying to hire engineers or build out their engineering practices. So I did that a few places and I did that for equity, which was cool. And then I ended up getting one like bigger consulting job, which is what I have on my LinkedIn, which is that I was sort of the interim CTO at time. And I don't know anything about publishing, just to be clear. This was like a funny thing for me to get, but my cousin is the owner of Time. He's the Salesforce founder, Mark Benioff. And he'd asked, hey, would you be willing to like go in and like help the tech team at Time get to just like operate better, make sure the stack is good. It's like our CMS infrastructure in the right spot. Is our paid ads infrastructure in the right spot? And like, I didn't know anything about this, but like I could at least ask some questions from someone who'd worked in the technology industry for a long time, which, at this point I had done. And so that was a great gig. I did that like 3 days a week, basically, while I was also, at this point, I'd like decided like, okay, I want to start another company and I want to like take everything I'd learned. So I was doing this consulting thing part-time and I was doing this like, let me think through ideas and stuff that I would actually want to work on for the other part of the time. I did that for about, I guess like a year and a half. It took me to get conviction on wanting to start Warp, but that was kind of a cool period of like in between intense startup, relax a little and then start another company, which is intense.
What is the original idea for Warp? Where does that come from?
Yeah. So for Warp, I narrowed it down much more quickly. I was like, what are the kinds of things that I want to work on? So I wanted to work on stuff that I knew, stuff that I cared about. To me, that immediately had me focusing on either stuff that was more like Google Docs, because like I knew that space really, really well. So that would be like productivity app for knowledge workers or stuff for developers. And so like I've been a developer for a really long time. And so I just started like trying to pay attention to the tools I was using, the problems that I was having, what I thought might honestly fundamentally just be like a useful thing. Like if I had a product that worked differently, I ended up just thinking like the tools for developers from a like usability and product standpoint, they just like weren't at consumer quality with kind of how I thought about it. I was like, why do developers have such shitty tools from a polish level compared to things like Google Docs? And like there was this trend where it used to be that consumers had the best quality experiences in their apps. And then like at this point, sort of like Slack and Zoom had come along and replaced WebEx and whatever the Slack predecessor was.
And this is like Zoom heydays, right? This is like right after 2020 COVID pandemic sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, there's this trend where there's like this consumerization of enterprise software where you can kind of win. I think Notion was another good example too, where it's like you kind of win by offering a much higher level of product polish and just displace like an incumbent app, which has like a really horrible user experience. So I think like WebEx is a great one. I don't know if you ever use that tool. You would go in and you'd have to like install something every time. And it was like, you couldn't get into the call, and then the video quality was horrible. And like, I don't know, Zoom is just like, they're like, let's just make something that's really easy to use and has great video quality. And so I was looking for the same type of thing for developer tools. And the problem with developer tools is like, for the most part, they've been built by developers for themselves and built by like the most hardcore developers who like wanted like the most advanced, like crazy configurations. It was almost like a video gamer like mentality. And like, that's great for like Linus Torvalds or something. It's like, yeah, of course it should work that way. But I didn't want it to work that way. And like, I'm not like an incompetent developer. Like I'm like a very good developer who I care much more about the product that I'm building for an end user than I do about like spending a ton of time like tweaking and customizing and like learning every like keyboard shortcut on my tool. I want a thing that's like easy to work and not frustrating. And so I started thinking like there was an opportunity in the developer tool space to sort of rethink some of the core like tooling that developers use. If you want to be very horizontal, which I also was like, I want to work on something that has like the most impact for the most people. I really didn't want to work on like a niche developer tool, like a better Kubernetes thingamajig or whatever. I wanted to build something that every developer could potentially use. And so there's two developer tools that matter. There's the code editor, the IDE, and there's the terminal. And of the two, I was like, the IDE is like more tolerable to use, in my opinion, than the terminal. The more I thought about like the terminal is super duper powerful if you can figure out how to use it well.
For maybe the non-technical, like how would you separate, where does the IDE come in? Where does the terminal come in?
Yeah, so the IDE is a thing where you open it up. It kind of looks like Microsoft Word. It has like all your code files in it. And like what you do in it is you like type code. It will show you if the code like basically like looks right by giving you like features like auto correction and autocomplete. But it's basically Microsoft Word for code editing. And the terminal is the black screen with the green text on it that you see in all the hacker movies, where it's the place where you run the programs that you're writing. And the interface is like you type text, you're telling the computer to do something in like a terminal command language, and then it does it and it spits out a response. It turns out like you could do a gajillion things. There's a reason it's the hacker tool of choice, because you can do anything on your system. You can do anything in the cloud. You can like do all kinds of data analysis and logs analysis, but it's like you have to kind of know the magic spell in order to use it. And that magic spell is like, what's the terminal command? And so I was like, hey, that's like a very limiting thing for this interface, where if you were to make the interface more accessible, you know, you could keep the power, but you could make everyone who uses the tool feel way more powerful. And so I was like, there's definitely a better product to build here. What was super unclear was, is there a good business around it? And so the business that we sort of settled on, and I say we, it was I'm the only founder of Warp, but I did like kick this idea off. Honestly, a bunch of like investor friends at this point, a couple of whom ended up backing the seed round, which was cool. And the business that we decided on was like, there's probably like an analogous business to like Figma or Notion or Google Docs, where you build a collaboration platform around these workflows that developers are doing from the command line. And so that business ended up not being actually the business that we're in. Now we're in like we're in the AI business and the agent business. That was the initial business idea. And it gave me enough conviction that I thought it was worth starting a company, raising money, and trying to build a team to execute on it.
Did you raise right out of the gate?
I raised right out of the gate. So this was another like self-made kind of lesson. Like at self-made, I felt like we were always our backs against the wall with capital. There's something good about that from like, hey, it puts pressure on the team to deliver on like a fixed time frame, but it also can force you to like be very, very short term in how you think. And so I was like, if I actually want to build a better product, this is going to take a bunch of engineers a bunch of time to build something that is actually meaningfully better. And so we raised, at the time, it was like a big seed round. We raised like a $6 million seed round. And in 2020, that was quite big.
Who led the seed round?
The seed was led by GV, so Google Ventures. We raised a seed round. First person who I brought into the team was a designer who I'd worked with at Google. We spent a bunch of time making the concepts that I'd had when I did the raise. And I did the raise just off of a deck, essentially. And like, you know, at this point, I was like the second time founder. And I think I had like some track record with SelfMade. You know, SelfMade, we actually got real revenue and got it through Series A. So it's like I was a little bit known in the VC community and people wanted to invest.
Well, and actually, I would say from a VC perspective too, like you could easily argue you kind of de-risk. The most riskiest bet you're taking on ex-Googler is frankly the 0 to 1. Like, can they actually get something off the ground? You know, because they can obviously scale a product and all that. And I think with SelfMade, you certainly would argue you proved that part, that Google proves the other part.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, okay.
We did that. And like, I think that probably a second time founder is kind of the sweet spot. Like if I were a VC, I would often be looking for like second time founder where the first thing they'd gotten some traction. It wasn't like a total dud, but it wasn't like a runaway success either. So the person's still super hungry. I think VCs, they liked my profile. And I knew these people personally for a really long time. From a like who you work with standpoint for founders, I actually think probably the most important thing when you pick the VC is like just like having a strong level of trust and the ability to be transparent and feeling like you don't have to manage them. And there's someone who you're going to want to talk to when things are not going well, as opposed to someone who you're like dreading talk to or feel like you have to like present a story when things aren't going well. So these people were people I'd known for, a really long time at that point. And so that worked out very well.
And so how many people do you hire with the 6 million and how long do you just kind of like go heads down building mode?
My goal at the outset was like hire designers. So the concept of the company was building a better product. And to me, the best way to make that a reality is like to work with like an awesome product designer. So I hired this person who I'd worked with at Google who was a great designer. And then we wanted to hire maybe like 4 or 5 engineers, not more than that, to sort of build out the initial product. And like the milestones for the product were, can we build something that we used internally? That was like the first one. And, the second one was like, can we kind of like get anyone external to use it? The third was like, once people try using it, do they stick with it? Do they engage? Do they retain? Can we get it to become like the daily driver for some group of people? And then after that, it was figuring out how to grow it. But like, yeah, we spent really took like, I want to say like 6 to 9 months to build something that we could use internally. We then like put it in front of a bunch of friends. None of them cared or wanted to use it. So that didn't work. And so what we ended up doing instead of that was like basically posting on Hacker News that we were building this new terminal. It was built in Rust. It had all these features. We posted it with a wait list, just like sign up, give us your email if you're interested in trying it out. And it got to the top of Hacker News. And we got 10,000 developers to sign up for it the first day. And so like, that was great. Cause it was like, okay, there are people who want something like this.
Why did none of your friends want it if so many other people wanted it? Just bad luck?
It's because like your friends might not be like your target first user. Like there's real danger in getting such a biased signal. It could have been biased the other way too. It could have been like, they want to like support us. And so they use it. And so that's like another like way you can get false signal. That's no good. And so I think better if you can do something that's a little bit more realistic. And so putting it out into the world where developers hang out and seeing if developers actually cared was a much smarter way of getting initial signal. And like, it really increased our conviction that like people want a better version of this thing, or at least they're willing to try it. And so that was awesome. And so we did that. And then we sort of like released cohorts of people off the wait list to just try to like see if they would engage and stick with it. And then it was like I said, it was like, can you get the retention to be really good? We got the retention to be what I think of as like, where you want it to be for this type of product. And most importantly, does it like flatten out? So do people use it forever? And then after that, it was like, can we grow the free user base? And I don't know how much time we have to go into sort of the full, like how we got from there to where we're at now, but like that was the sort of start of it.
The transition, obviously, this is happening like end of 21, early 22. Maybe we fast forward like when ChatGPT comes out or if that's like, what is that kind of inflection point that you decide to go all in on AI?
Yeah. So like in broad strokes, so what we built out of the gate was something that had a really, really nice user experience, but for a free product. It kind of had to be a free product because, there's like no marginal costs. To us, it was like pure client-side software. Like, I guess we could have like charged. It was going to be hard to monetize that.
The other terminals were free, like whatever people, like Status Quo is free, right?
The other, we're competing against free. There's a free terminal that ships with your computer. There's a bunch of free like existing competitors. And like, I do think we had like a much nicer interface. And so we were able to grow that into the hundreds of thousands of developers using it, but we weren't able to really like create a business model around it.
Was that free, by the way, or were you marketing aggressively to like get the users?
It was basically free, like all of that growth. We didn't start really investing in any kind of like paid marketing until we had revenue. We would do small things, maybe like host hackathons, but we certainly weren't doing like performance marketing at scale or like filming ads.
Got it. So, I mean, it was really word of mouth, like 100,000 of developers using it through word of mouth. Obviously, you had a good product.
Yeah, like word of mouth. We had like a little referral program where we'd like send people swag. My mindset at that point was like, it doesn't make a ton of sense to spend a lot of money on free user growth. We started then building out some of the things that we thought would be more of like the paid product, which were like the collaboration platform, which we did get some people to pay for, but it was like kind of slow growth. I wouldn't say it was like going to like turn us into a really big business. We started putting AI into Warp really early, actually before ChatGPT. So we were using Codex, which was the same thing that was powering the initial version of Copilot. And so the first AI feature we had was like, you can basically type in English and get commands back.
And this was when? This was like mid 22?
This was like the end of 2022, I think.
And by the way, you raised more money but in that time frame, right? You raised an A?
We did. So we raised an A, and the A was led by Dylan Field, who's the founder and CEO of Figma, who was an angel investor. He just really believed in the product and the team and was like, again, like our investors for Warp were very much of the mindset of like long-term, if you build something that's really useful for hundreds of thousands or millions of developers, that's going to be a big business opportunity one way or the other. And so that's why Dylan invested. That's also why Sequoia invested at the Series B. Again, we didn't have like revenue traction at that point, but we just had a product that people really liked. They were very, again, of the mindset, like that's hard to get for developers, and developers are very, very important sort of market if you can get people using it.
How much was the A and then the B?
So we raised like 15 to 17 at the A, and then the B was big. It was like a $50 million Series B.
Pre-revenue.
Pre-revenue. Crazy, right?
Wild.
Again, this is, I think, different times.
This is what, beginning of 23?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. I mean, the markets had already started coming down second half of 22, but I think VC was like late to that game, yeah.
I don't know how we pulled this off. Again, I think it's going to end up being a smart investment for these people. And so, again, we were growing the free user base well, but we didn't have business model really that was working. We didn't have revenue growth. Towards the end of 2022, we'd start to put AI. And when ChatGPT came out, we were like, this really makes a lot of sense in our product, because the chief thing that makes the user experience of the terminal hard is like you have to do everything in this like arcane command language. And the LLMs are very, very good at taking English and turning it into commands. We were conceiving of it in like a kind of limited way. We put in like a chat panel, which I think is what a lot of people did at the time. And then we realized relatively quickly, like, hey, this is useful. People were using the chat panel, but we're like, there's actually a much better integration that belongs in Warp, where instead of having like a chat panel on the side of the app, the whole app should just be you interact with it in English. Or if you want to interact with it in terminal command, you can do that. And so we moved to this model and we called it agent mode, which everyone has copied that name, by the way. If you look it up on ChatGPT, we were the first people to call anything agent mode. And the idea was you would just, instead of typing commands, you could just type or even just speak English to your terminal, asking it to do stuff. And the use case for that was like, fix this Git problem for me, or like do this deploy. So it was very terminal oriented stuff. That was useful. And that had a real cost associated to it.
This is instead of getting it in terminal language on a chat and then kind of plugging it in, just like talk to it like you normally would.
Exactly. Instead of like copy paste, you just like directly interact with it in English. And that's like the way that it should work. That's the way that Claude Code works. And again, we were before Claude Code in doing this.
This is mid 23 that you did this?
This was 24.
24. Okay.
This was like early 24 where we launched this feature, Agent Mode. I think spring 24. And then at that point, we're like, okay, everything needs to be oriented around sort of AI. Everything needs to be oriented around agents. We didn't really have a coding product. And so that's like what we've been kind of working more and more towards, is like making Warp a universal interface for doing agentic development work. We don't even call Warp a terminal anymore. Like we call it an agentic development environment, because it's really like the primary modality in a terminal is running commands. The primary modality in Warp is instructing you what to do in English.
Does it come into the IDE world, or it's still different than that?
It's now in the IDE world. The stuff we've been doing recently is like, especially with tools like Gemini, CLI, and Claude Code, making the terminal the center of the agentic workflow. We're just like, we can do a way better job of this because we control the whole app. And so it's like, what do you actually need to do agentic development? And what I mean by agentic development is like the way that you're building features is like you're telling the computer in English that you want a feature built. You're telling the computer in English to fix a bug. You're telling it to figure out why your servers are crashing. You're telling it to deploy your thing to Vercel, like literally in English. The thing that you want is something that looks like a terminal, but it has a bunch of the features of the IDE. So it's like we've been adding the ability so that you could edit code. You can see all of your files. You can see all of the code diffs that the agent is creating. You can review the diffs that the agent is creating. And so, our thesis here now is like neither a regular terminal nor a regular IDE is like the right approach for agentic development. It's like you really want a tool that's built for this workflow. And so we've gone all in on that in Warp. And that's what's driving like our super fast growth now, which is cool.
You launched it in like 24 and you started monetizing it around then too?
Yeah. So what we launched in 24, we started monetizing, and that got us, we got like to $1 million in revenue on that. And like, I think it took a while, like 300 days or something, where it was part collaboration features and it was part like telling Warp to fix like terminal stuff. Meaning like, again, I don't know how technical the people listening are, but it's like, fix this like Git thing for me or fix this Docker thing. So these are like fixing small annoyances in the terminal, which is valuable. But it was when we launched in June, the agentic development environment and fully turned Warp into something that could do coding and like actually prove that. So we're number one on one of the coding benchmarks, which is Terminal Bench. We're number 3 now on SweBench, so the 2 public coding benchmarks. So we kind of like totally repositioned as being like this all-in-one tool if you're doing agentic development.
Does this become a Cursor competitor, like the way you're positioned now? Use one or the other realistically?
Yeah, our competitors now are Cursor and Claude Code, but that's fine. It's better to be in a market like those are just 2 super fast growing tools. And like you kind of want to go to where the competition is in some sense. Like, again, it's like counter to the typical startup advice. There's competition there because the demand for it is insane. It's very, very early in this market. Like, even though there's tools that are growing very quickly, like, I guess it depends how you look at it. It's not the developer tools market anymore. Like, it's the market for automating the production of software, which is something closer to like the market for like paying software developers to develop software. It's like in between the developer tools market and that, which is more like $1 trillion market. There's just a very, very low penetration of these agentic tools into that market. And so it's a gigantic opportunity with a ton of demand where we have a really differentiated product approach. And so, yeah, we're competing with Claude Code and Cursor, but Warp actually does way more. It does do all of your DevOps and production workflows. It does do all of your like Git and Docker and all that stuff, but it also is awesome at writing code and building features. And so you get sort of one bespoke interface for developing in this new way. And like when we launched that, we started growing. The kind of curve went like that to like that. And that's like maintained or even like it's accelerating still, which is cool.
That was like 3 months or so, 4 months ago that you launched?
That was like 3 months ago. Yeah.
Okay. And now it's like this 3 million more or 4 million more a month you're adding?
Yeah. So it took us like 300 days to add the first million. And then I think by the time we had launched the ADE, we had like $1.5 million or close to 2 million. So we already started to accelerate. But then when we did this like repositioning, it really started to grow quickly. And it's been growing. We're not quite at $1 million a week, but we're getting closer and closer to that. So that's pretty cool.
That's cool, man. Well, listen, we'll stop it there. I know we went way over. Let me just ask real quick the last kind of 3 questions that we always end on. The first one I think is pretty obvious, but like, when did you feel like you had true product market fit?
I think it was after this ADE launch. It was verifying that launch wasn't like a spike, because sometimes you get launch spikes and it just sort of diminishes and goes back to baseline. But the fact that it's now persisted for months, there's other ways of looking at it. There's revenue. There's just like the things that people write us on the feedback around like, this let me build this thing that I never would have been able to build. Or like, I've been a developer for 20 years and this like saved me, weeks of time setting this thing up. So it's like you start to get a different type of qualitative feedback. Whereas before it would be like, people were like, yeah, this is an awesome terminal. I really love using it. It's so much nicer than like the iTerm. Now it's like, I couldn't do my job without this, or this is like really transforming the way that I do my work. That made it very clear that we were onto something.
Was there ever a time with Warp where you felt like you did at the last startup where you kind of thought maybe things weren't going to work out?
Yeah, I mean, that I kind of thought that in the worst case for Warp, what our business strategy would be is like build something that gets a very, very large free user base and have to sell the company to someone who just wants like developers in their ecosystem. And I always kind of thought that would be like a sort of fallback plan. And we still do have that like hedge if we really need it. I haven't felt for a long time like Warp was going to be like a zero, but I did feel like, are we going to get something where the revenue grows really quickly, where we're solving a problem that's like way, way, way more important to developers? I definitely had like lots of moments of questions around that. We took stabs at monetizing in various ways early on. It didn't quite like catch fire. And so, yeah, but I never felt the way that I did at the last startup where I was like, is this thing that I'm building not valuable at all?
And last question, if you had like one piece of advice for an early stage founder, what might that be?
Let me think about that. God, there's a lot of things I could choose here. I'm going to pick like, just think shit through for yourself from first principles. It's good to go out and get advice from people who've done stuff before, whether it's other founders or investors or your accelerator or whatever. But ultimately, like, you should be able to sort of convince yourself that what you're doing makes sense and explain to yourself why. And like, you'll find that it's logically impossible to follow the advice of everyone you get because the advice will be conflicting. And so the more that you can be like, here's what I'm doing and here's why, and I've thought that through from like a few first principles and I believe it, then the better.
Well, Zach, thanks so much for jumping on the show, dude. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Wow, what an episode. You're probably in awe. You're in absolute shock. You're like, that helped me so much. So guess what? Now it's your turn to help someone else. Share the episode in the WhatsApp group you have with founders. Share it on that Slack channel. Send it to your founder friends and help them out. Trust me, they will love you for it.